It was supposed to be a regular night, just another party like we'd been to before. Emma and I had been married for 8 years, and things between us had been, all right, I guess. Not great, not terrible, just fine. But tonight? Something felt off from the second we walked in the door. Maybe it was how she seemed more distant than usual. I shrugged it off at first, told myself it was nothing. I mean, we've all had long days, right? Work was stressing both of us out. So when she didn't grab my hand like she used to when we walked into a place full of people, I figured she was just tired or distracted. No big deal. We arrived at our friend's house, and I could already feel the atmosphere was different, louder, wilder. Drinks were flowing, and people were laughing a bit too hard. Emma wasted no time blending into the crowd, talking to people I barely knew. She's always been more outgoing than me, more comfortable in those situations. So I grabbed a beer and tried to loosen up, telling myself I was just overthinking. But then I noticed her with him. I didn't know who he was. Some guy I hadn't seen at these parties before. Tall, well-dressed, confident in that kind of way that gets under your skin without you even knowing why. At first, I didn't think anything of it. Emma talks to everyone. But as the night wore on, they were laughing more, getting closer. Every time I looked, there she was, leaning in, touching his arm, her smile a little too wide. Something was definitely off. I tried to ignore it. Told myself I was being paranoid, that I was imagining things. I mean, it's not like I'm the jealous type. I trust her, or at least I did. But seeing her like that with some guy I didn't even know, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I told myself I was overreacting, but it was like my gut wouldn't let it go. The more I watched them, the more it felt like I was seeing something I shouldn't be. Every time I tried to talk to her, she seemed distracted, like I wasn't really there. The space between us felt bigger than the whole room. I couldn't figure out what was worse, feeling invisible or seeing her look at him the way she used to look at me. As the night went on, it got harder to ignore. Emma was practically glued to this guy. I tried joining their conversation a few times, but I felt like an outsider in my own marriage. Every time I stepped up, it was like I interrupted something. They'd go quiet, share a look, and then she'd brush me off with some half-hearted smile. I told myself again that I was being stupid, that she was just being friendly. But man, the way they were standing, close enough that their arms brushed, heads leaning in like they had some private joke. My stomach was churning. That knot in my gut was turning tighter with every passing minute. I started drifting through the party, making small talk with people, but I wasn't really there. My eyes kept finding her across the room, and every time I saw them together, that knot twisted harder. I'd catch her laughing at something he said, laughing in a way she hadn't with me in God knows how long. At one point, I made an excuse to go outside, just to get some air. I leaned against the wall, taking deep breaths, trying to get my head straight. This is ridiculous, I told myself. She's your wife. You're just tired, reading into things. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. When I came back inside, it was like the party had kicked up a notch. People were getting louder, drunker, sloppier. And Emma? She was still with that guy, now even closer. She wasn't just talking to him anymore. She was practically hanging on him, her hand brushing his back as she leaned in to whisper something. My heart dropped. I walked over again, this time with a bit more urgency, trying to break into whatever bubble they'd made around themselves. Hey Emma, do you want another drink? I asked, my voice coming out more tense than I meant it to. She barely looked at me. No, I'm good, she said, waving me off without even meeting my eyes. Then she went right back to her conversation, ignoring me like I wasn't even there. That was the moment when it really hit me. Something was happening here. Something I couldn't pretend wasn't real anymore. After that, I couldn't just stand around pretending everything was fine. Every time I saw them together, it was like a knife twisting deeper. The way she laughed at his jokes, how her hand lingered on his arm, it all felt too familiar, too intimate. And the worst part? She didn't seem to care that I was watching. I grabbed another beer, trying to calm myself down. But nothing worked. My mind was racing, thinking of every possible explanation. Maybe she was drunk, maybe she was just having fun, maybe this was all in my head. But deep down I knew. This wasn't just her being friendly. Something was happening right in front of me, and I was powerless to stop it. I watched as they moved from the living room to the back of the house, heading toward the hallway. I followed, keeping my distance, pretending to chat with someone so it wouldn't look like I was tailing them. But I couldn't help it. I needed to know what the hell was going on. They disappeared down the hall, laughing as they went. My heart started pounding. I couldn't shake the feeling that something bad was about to happen. I stood there for a moment, frozen, trying to convince myself not to follow. Give her space. Don't make a scene, I told myself. But then I heard them, her laughing, a low murmur of his voice, the sound of a door clicking shut. That's when I lost it. I marched down the hall, my hands clenched into fists, trying to keep my temper in check. I didn't know what I was going to find behind that door, but I wasn't going to just stand there and let it happen. I reached the door and paused, my hand hovering over the handle. My heart was pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. I told myself to calm down, to be rational, but every instinct in me was screaming that something was wrong. Then I heard it, someone behind me, talking, laughing. Did you see that? She's already undressing in there. I froze. The guy next to me, some drunk idiot I didn't know, was grinning like he'd just witnessed the best thing he'd seen all night. My blood ran cold. I don't remember what I said to him, or if I said anything at all. I just felt my whole body go numb. The door in front of me felt like it was miles away. My hand was still hovering over the handle when it opened. And there she was. The door swung open, and there she was, Emma, completely naked, stumbling out of the room, laughing like she didn't have a care in the world. Her hair was a mess, her makeup smeared, and the look on her face was carefree, almost like she hadn't just humiliated me in front of the entire party. My heart stopped. I stood there, frozen, watching her as she wobbled on her feet, barely able to stand straight. Behind her the guy, the same one she'd been flirting with all night, was smirking, clearly enjoying the spectacle. He didn't even try to hide it. The door stayed open behind him, revealing the messy bed, the crumpled sheets. Everything around me went blurry. The people in the hallway, the laughter, the music from the party, it all faded into the background. All I could focus on was her, standing there, exposed, like this was some kind of joke. I wanted to yell, to scream at her, at him, at everyone who stood around watching like it was some kind of show. But nothing came out. I just stood there, my fists clenched, trying to process what I was seeing. The woman I'd spent 8 years of my life with, the woman I loved, was standing in front of me like she didn't care that I was right there. Like I didn't exist. And then she saw me. Her smile faltered for a split second, but it was like she couldn't fully grasp the gravity of the situation. She giggled again, half drunk, and said, "Jim, what are you doing here?" That's when I snapped. Without thinking, without even realizing what I was doing, I charged at the guy. I didn't care about anything else in that moment. I just wanted to hurt him. To make him feel even a fraction of the pain that was tearing through me. My fists connected with his face before I even knew what was happening. He stumbled back, but I kept swinging, fueled by pure rage. I could hear people shouting, trying to pull me off him, but I didn't care. All I could think about was how they'd both made a fool out of me, right in front of everyone. I punched him again, harder this time, and he went down, blood streaming from his nose. Finally, someone grabbed me from behind, pulling me back. I didn't fight it. I stood there, breathing hard, looking down at the guy lying on the floor, groaning in pain. Emma was still standing there, looking at me with this dazed, confused expression. Like she couldn't understand why I was so mad. Like she didn't just destroy everything we had. "Jim." "I didn't mean," she started, her voice slurred and weak, but I couldn't listen to her. I couldn't even look at her anymore. Without another word, I turned and walked out of the party, my head spinning, my heart shattered into a million pieces. I don't even remember how I made it out of that house. One second, I was storming through the front door, and the next, I was sitting in my car, staring at the steering wheel, shaking with anger and humiliation. My hands were still clenched, knuckles bruised from hitting that guy. Everything felt surreal, like I was watching myself from a distance. The way she looked at me, the way she laughed, it was burned into my brain. I couldn't get it out of my head. I kept replaying it over and over, each time twisting the knife deeper. I should have done more. I should have screamed at her, yelled, asked her how she could do this to me. But I didn't. I couldn't. The only thing I could do was get out of there, because if I stayed, I don't know what I would have done. So there I was, sitting in the car, trying to catch my breath, trying to think straight. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I knew it was her. She was probably trying to call me, explain herself, maybe apologize. But I didn't want to hear it. I didn't want to hear her voice or any of her pathetic excuses. I grabbed the keys and started the car, needing to get as far away as possible. I didn't have a plan. I didn't know where I was going. I just needed to move, to escape. The road blurred under the streetlights as I drove aimlessly, my mind racing. I could barely think, barely process what had just happened. How could she do this to me? How could she betray me like that, so openly, in front of everyone? I trusted her. I thought we were okay, thought we'd made it through the tough times, and now, this? The road stretched out in front of me, empty and dark. I kept driving, faster than I should have, not caring where I ended up. Part of me wanted to just keep driving and never look back. Leave her, leave everything behind. But no matter how far I drove, the weight of what she did stayed with me, heavy in my chest, suffocating. My phone buzzed again, and this time I glanced at the screen. Emma. Again. I clenched my jaw and turned it off, throwing it into the passenger seat. I didn't want to hear her voice. Not now, not ever. I don't know how long I drove. Time didn't matter. I just kept going, hoping that somehow the miles would put enough distance between me and what I saw. But no matter how far I went, the anger, the shame, it stayed with me, burning hotter the more I thought about it. Eventually, I pulled into some random parking lot. Maybe a gas station or a diner, I don't even remember. I just needed to stop before I lost it completely. I sat there in the dark, staring at nothing, my mind racing. That's when my phone buzzed again. I'd forgotten it was still in the passenger seat. Part of me wanted to throw it out the window, but something made me reach for it. Maybe it was hope, maybe it was stupidity. But instead of Emma's name on the screen, it was an unknown number. Confused, I opened the message. It was a video. I hesitated, my heart racing. Something in my gut told me not to press play. But I couldn't stop myself. My thumb hovered over the screen for a second before I hit it. And there it was. Emma. In that room. With him. The sound of her laughing, the way she looked at him, the way she... I can't even say it. It was all there, on my screen. Everything I'd tried to push out of my mind, everything I hoped wasn't real, laid out in front of me in sickening detail. I felt like I was going to throw up. My stomach twisted into knots as I watched, my chest tight with anger and humiliation. I couldn't believe it. He had the nerve to record it, to send it to me like some kind of sick trophy. The smug look on his face, her giggles. It was more than I could handle. I dropped the phone, letting it fall to the floor of the car, and buried my face in my hands. I could feel the rage bubbling up inside me, boiling over, but there was nothing I could do in that moment except sit there, completely powerless. I wanted to hurt him. I wanted to find him and make him pay for what he'd done, for taking what was mine and throwing it in my face like that. I didn't care about the consequences. All I could think about was making him suffer, just like I was suffering now. I don't know how long I sat there, staring blankly at the dashboard, that video burning a hole in my mind. I couldn't shake the images, the sounds. It felt like my world had collapsed in a matter of minutes, and I was just left in the rubble, trying to figure out how to breathe again. Then the anger hit, and I wasn't thinking clearly anymore. My mind wasn't racing, it was screaming. I grabbed the phone off the floor and watched the video again, even though it made my stomach churn. And that smug look on his face, the way he touched her, it lit something inside me. I couldn't just let him get away with it. Before I even realized what I was doing, I turned the car around and started driving back. Back to the house. Back to him. I didn't care what happened next. I wasn't thinking about anything except one thing: he had to pay. The streets were empty as I sped through them, my hands gripping the wheel so hard I thought I might snap it in half. I could feel the rage building with every mile. It wasn't just about him anymore, it was about everything. The lies, the betrayal, the humiliation. Emma's face in that video, laughing, like she didn't care that she was ripping my heart out. It was too much. When I got to the house, the party was still going, but it had thinned out. People were stumbling out to their cars, drunk and laughing like nothing was wrong. I didn't care about any of them. All I cared about was finding him. I walked inside, ignoring the stares, the whispers. I didn't care that people were watching, that they were judging me. I had one thing on my mind. And then I saw him. He was standing in the corner, leaning against the wall, talking to some girl like nothing had happened. Like he hadn't just sent me a video of him with my wife. Like he hadn't destroyed everything I thought I had. That smirk was still on his face, and it sent me over the edge. I charged at him before I even realized it, grabbing him by the collar and slamming him against the wall. His smirk disappeared real quick when he saw the look on my face. He tried to say something, but I didn't let him. I just swung. My fist connected with his jaw, and the force of it knocked him sideways, but I didn't stop. I hit him again, harder this time. He stumbled, tried to fight back, but I was too far gone. I just kept swinging, my knuckles splitting open on his face, but I didn't feel it. All I could feel was the rage, the pain, the need to make him feel what I was feeling. Someone pulled me off him, but not before I got one last hit in. He crumpled to the floor, blood streaming from his nose and mouth, groaning in pain. I stood there, breathing hard, my chest heaving as I looked down at him. For a split second, I felt satisfied. Like I'd done what I needed to do. But that feeling didn't last. It faded almost as soon as it came, replaced by something worse. Emptiness. As I stood there, looking down at him, the emptiness swallowed me. The rage that had fueled me seconds ago was gone, leaving this deep, hollow pit inside me. He was lying there, bloodied and groaning, but it didn't make me feel any better. It didn't fix anything. I thought maybe hurting him would take away the pain I felt, but it didn't. It only made me feel worse. People were staring, whispering, and backing away like I was some kind of monster. Maybe I was. I didn't care anymore. Nothing mattered at that point. The damage was already done. I turned and walked out without a word, the whole room watching me in stunned silence. My body felt heavy, like every step took more effort than the last. I could hear someone behind me, maybe calling my name, maybe not. I wasn't listening. I just needed to get out of there. When I got back to the car, my knuckles were throbbing, but I barely noticed. I sat in the driver's seat, staring at the blood on my hands. His blood. But it didn't feel like victory. It felt like defeat. My phone was still lying in the passenger seat. Emma hadn't called again. I didn't know if I wanted her to. What could she even say that would make any of this better? There was no explanation for what she did. There was no apology that could undo what I saw. For a few minutes, I just sat there, completely still, trying to figure out what the hell I was supposed to do now. My whole life felt like it had come crashing down in a matter of hours. How do you pick up the pieces after something like that? How do you move on when the person you thought you'd spend your life with betrays you like that? I had no answers. I didn't even know where to go. The house wasn't an option. Not after what just happened. Not with her still there. So I did the only thing that made sense. I started driving again. Nowhere in particular, just away. I don't know how long I drove this time, but eventually, I found myself pulling into a motel. One of those rundown places you see off the highway, with flickering neon lights and a cracked sign out front. It felt fitting. I checked in, barely speaking to the guy behind the counter. He looked at me funny, probably because of the blood on my hands and my clothes. But I didn't care. I didn't care about anything. The room was small, dingy, and smelled like cigarettes. I didn't bother turning on the lights. I just collapsed onto the bed, staring up at the ceiling, trying to figure out how everything had gone so wrong so fast. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just numb. Lying on that bed, staring at the cracked ceiling, everything felt distant, like I was watching my life from the outside. The numbness had settled in deep. I didn't even have the energy to be angry anymore. It was just silence. The kind of silence that fills you up and makes you feel hollow at the same time. I must have stayed like that for hours. I couldn't sleep, couldn't think straight. My mind was running in circles, but all I could do was lie there, staring at nothing. The images from the video kept flashing through my head, mixed with the memory of Emma stumbling out of that room, naked and laughing, like she didn't care about anything. At some point, my phone buzzed again. For a second, I considered ignoring it like I had before. But the curiosity, or maybe just the masochism, got the better of me. I reached for it, hoping it wasn't another message from him. It was Emma. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the screen. Did I even want to hear what she had to say? What could she possibly tell me that would make any of this better? But I pressed play anyway, my heart pounding as her voice came through. "Jim, please just listen," she started, her voice shaky and full of tears. "I'm sorry. I don't even know how to explain what happened. I was drunk, I wasn't thinking." I stopped the message right there. I couldn't do it. Hearing her voice made it real all over again, and I wasn't ready for that. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I threw the phone to the other side of the bed, where it landed with a dull thud. I couldn't listen to her excuses, her lies. The numbness was starting to crack, and underneath it, I could feel the pain creeping back in. The betrayal, the humiliation. It all hit me like a wave. How could she do this to me? How could she let things get this far, knowing I was right there, watching it all fall apart? I sat up, my head spinning. I needed air. I needed something, anything to make the pain go away, even just for a second. So I grabbed my keys and left the motel, stepping out into the cold night. The parking lot was empty, and the air was sharp against my skin, but it felt good. It made me feel alive, which was more than I could say for the past few hours. I leaned against my car, staring out at the highway, the headlights of passing cars streaking by. I wondered how many other people had lives falling apart right now. How many others were dealing with the same kind of pain, the same kind of betrayal. But none of it mattered. All that mattered was that my life, my marriage, was crumbling, and I didn't know what to do about it. I stood out there in the cold for a long time, just staring into the distance, trying to make sense of everything. But there was no sense to it. None of it made any damn sense. I thought about leaving, really leaving, just getting in the car and driving until I couldn't anymore. But something held me back. Maybe it was the need for closure. Maybe it was that I couldn't let her win, not like this. I went back inside, pacing around the motel room, my thoughts spiraling. I knew I had to confront her, had to hear her explain it, even though I wasn't sure if I'd believe anything she said. But I couldn't live with all the unanswered questions, the what-ifs haunting me. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Emma. This time, I opened it, not because I wanted to, but because I had to. Jim, please talk to me. I need to explain. It wasn't supposed to happen like that. I'm sorry. I don't know what I was thinking. Please, just come home. We need to talk. Her words felt empty, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed to face her. To see the look in her eyes when she tried to explain this mess. I grabbed my keys again and drove back toward the house, not sure if I was ready for what would happen next. The drive felt long, the silence in the car suffocating. When I finally pulled up to the house, it looked the same as it always did. Our home. Except now it felt like a lie. I sat in the car for a minute, staring at the front door, wondering how the hell we had gotten here. When I finally walked inside, the place was quiet. Most of the lights were off, except for the one in the living room. And there she was, sitting on the couch, her face pale and her eyes red from crying. Jim, she started, standing up when she saw me, but I raised a hand to stop her. I didn't want her touching me. Not yet. Don't, I said, my voice cold and sharp. Don't try to make this better. Just tell me the truth. All of it. She stared at me for a moment, her lips trembling like she was trying to hold back more tears. I didn't mean for any of this to happen, she whispered. I was drunk and he was just being friendly at first, and I don't know how it got so out of hand. I didn't mean to hurt you. I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. You didn't mean to hurt me? Emma, you undressed in front of everyone. You disappeared with him while I was right there. And then that video, I choked on the words, the anger rising again. You didn't just hurt me. You destroyed everything. Her face crumpled, and she collapsed back onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. I'm sorry, she sobbed. I'm so sorry. I don't know how to fix this. I stood there, watching her cry, feeling nothing but cold, empty rage. You can't fix this, I said, my voice low. What you did, there's no fixing it. No apology is going to undo what happened. She looked up at me, her eyes desperate, pleading. But I love you, Jim. I do. It was a mistake, a stupid, horrible mistake. Please just give me a chance to make it right. I stared at her for a long moment, the words sinking in. She was begging for forgiveness, but I wasn't sure I had any left to give. Her words hung in the air, heavy and desperate. I love you. It felt like a joke, like some twisted punchline after everything she'd done. But I didn't laugh. I didn't even react. I just stood there, watching her crumble in front of me, my chest tight with all the things I wanted to say, but couldn't. I don't think you understand, I finally said, my voice coming out colder than I expected. This isn't something you can just apologize for. You don't get to throw around the word love like it's supposed to erase what happened. Do you even know what you've done to me? She wiped her face, her hands trembling, and shook her head. I know I messed up, Jim. I know I hurt you. But it didn't mean anything. It was a mistake one night, and I cut her off, the anger bubbling back up again. One night? You really think that makes it better? You embarrassed me in front of everyone, Emma. You were naked, laughing, like I didn't even exist. And then you let that guy record it and send it to me? Do you have any idea what that feels like? She flinched at my words, her body shaking as more tears rolled down her face. I didn't know about the video. I swear, Jim, I didn't know he was recording. I didn't. Does it matter? I snapped, stepping closer, my voice rising. Does any of that matter now? The damage is done. You let it happen. You didn't stop him. You didn't stop yourself. She sat there, sobbing, but I didn't feel any sympathy. I couldn't. Not after what she put me through. I wanted to feel something, anything, but all I felt was that same cold emptiness, like she had drained the life out of me along with our marriage. I can't even look at you, I muttered, turning away from her. Every time I close my eyes, all I see is you and him. You destroyed us, Emma. You broke everything. She got up from the couch and moved toward me, her hands reaching out, desperate. Jim, please. I know you hate me right now, but I don't want to lose you. We can get through this. We can go to counseling, work on this. Please just let me try. I stepped back, not wanting her anywhere near me. Work on this? How? How are we supposed to work on something when I can't trust you anymore? When I can't even stand to be in the same room as you? Her face fell, and she looked like I had just punched her in the gut. But I didn't care. I couldn't care. The betrayal was too deep, too raw. Please, Jim, she whispered, her voice cracking. I love you. I'll do anything to make this right. I shook my head, taking another step back. You already made your choice, Emma. You made it when you disappeared into that room with him. You made it when you laughed in my face. Her sobs filled the room again, but I didn't stay to watch her break down any further. I couldn't handle it. I needed space. I needed air. I needed to get out of this suffocating house, away from her and everything she'd ruined. Without another word, I turned and walked out the door, leaving her alone in the wreckage of our life. I slammed the door behind me and stood in the driveway, breathing hard. The cool night air hit my face, but it didn't clear my head. Nothing could. My mind was a mess, racing between the memories of what just happened and the life I thought we had. I got into the car again. My hands were still shaking as I gripped the steering wheel. I didn't have a plan, didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay there. The house felt poisoned now. Our home, the place where we'd shared holidays, made memories, talked about our future. It was nothing but a shell of lies. I drove faster than I should have, my heart pounding with each mile I put between me and that house. My thoughts were jumbled, flashes of her laugh, her face, the look of shock when I hit that guy. Over and over again, those moments played in my head. I tried to think about what went wrong. When did it start? Was there some sign I missed? I kept replaying the months, the years, digging through everything, looking for some kind of clue. But nothing made sense. I thought we were okay. Not perfect, but okay. I thought we had something solid, something we could lean on when things got hard. Clearly, I was wrong. I didn't even realize where I was going until I found myself pulling into the parking lot of the old park near our neighborhood, the place where we used to go when we first got married. It was quiet, just me and the dark trees swaying in the breeze. I parked the car, turned off the engine, and sat there, staring out at the empty swings. It felt surreal to be sitting there, in a place that used to mean so much to us, while everything fell apart. I remembered when we'd come here years ago, sitting on those swings, talking about all the things we were going to do. Starting a family, getting a bigger house, traveling. It felt like a lifetime ago. And now? I didn't even know if we had a future. How do you rebuild something after it's been shattered like that? The thought of Emma kept creeping back into my head. Her sobs, her desperate pleas. I love you, she kept saying, like it meant anything anymore. Like those words hadn't been torn apart the second she let him touch her. The phone buzzed again. I didn't even want to look at it, but I did anyway. Another message from her. Please come back. I'm so sorry. I need to fix this. We can work through it, Jim. I love you. I wanted to scream. How could she think love was enough? After everything? After standing there, naked and laughing, in front of everyone? After letting that guy send me a video of them together, mocking me, humiliating me? I threw the phone onto the passenger seat and stared out the window again. The anger was simmering, but it wasn't the hot, explosive kind. It was cold now, deeper. A part of me was starting to accept that nothing she said would change what I felt. This wasn't something you could just work through with a few therapy sessions or apologies. This was betrayal on a level I couldn't come back from. But what did that mean for us? Divorce? Could I really just end everything? 8 years down the drain because of one night? I felt sick just thinking about it. But staying? Trying to forgive her? Trying to pretend like it didn't happen? I didn't know what I was going to do. My mind kept bouncing between thoughts of leaving her and thoughts of giving her another chance. But that video, that laughter, the look on her face, they haunted me. How was I supposed to move on from that? I sat there for a long time, the silence of the park pressing in around me, thinking about the man I was before all this. The man who trusted his wife. The man who thought his marriage was strong enough to survive anything. That man felt so far away now, like he'd been ripped out of my life and replaced by this hollow version of myself. And the worst part was, even after everything, part of me still loved her. That's what hurt the most. I wanted to stop caring, to just walk away and never look back. But the years we spent together, the life we built, it wasn't that easy to throw away. No matter how much I wanted it to be. I leaned my head back against the seat, closing my eyes. What was I supposed to do? How do you move forward when the person you trusted most in the world turns out to be the one who cuts you the deepest? The cold wind outside rustled the leaves, but inside the car, it was dead silent. Just me and the wreckage of my thoughts, alone in a life that felt like it had just fallen apart. I don't know how long I stayed there, sitting in that parked car with the weight of everything pressing down on me. The anger had burned out, leaving this raw, empty ache in its place. I felt exhausted, like I hadn't slept in days, but there was no way I could rest. My mind wouldn't let me. At some point, I knew I had to face it. Face her. Whatever was left of our life, it was still waiting back at that house, and I couldn't avoid it forever. As much as I wanted to disappear, to just drive off and leave it all behind, I wasn't that kind of person. I needed answers. I needed to know what came next, even if I didn't have the strength to hear it. I started the car again and drove home. Each mile felt heavier than the last, like I was dragging myself towards something I didn't want to deal with, but had no choice but to face. When I pulled into the driveway, the house looked the same as always, calm, quiet, like nothing had changed. But everything had. I couldn't even look at it without feeling sick. My stomach twisted in knots as I got out of the car, walking slowly toward the door. Inside, the lights were still dim. The house was silent, except for the sound of my own footsteps. I saw her sitting at the kitchen table, her face pale, her eyes swollen from crying. She looked up when she heard me, her lips trembling, like she wasn't sure what to say. "Jim," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I didn't think you'd come back." I stood there, staring at her, trying to figure out what I even wanted to say. A part of me wanted to scream at her, to make her understand just how deeply she'd broken me. Another part of me didn't want to talk at all. What was the point? She knew what she did. Words wouldn't change that. "I had to," I finally said, my voice cold. "We can't just pretend this didn't happen." She wiped her eyes, nodding slowly. I know we need to talk. I don't know how to start. I don't know how to fix this." "There's no fixing it, Emma," I said, my words coming out sharper than I intended. "You can't just undo what you did. You can't erase what happened." Her face crumpled, and she buried her head in her hands, sobbing softly. "I'm sorry, Jim. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for it to happen. I didn't mean to hurt you." I clenched my fists, feeling that familiar surge of anger bubbling back up. "Didn't mean to hurt me?" I repeated, my voice rising. "Emma, you humiliated me in front of everyone. You laughed, you let that guy. And then you let him record it. How the hell am I supposed to get past that?" She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "I didn't know he was recording. I didn't know, I swear. I was drunk, I wasn't thinking. I know that doesn't make it better, but I never wanted to hurt you. I leaned against the wall, rubbing my face in frustration. I don't care if you were drunk, Emma. You made a choice. You didn't care about me. You didn't care that I was right there, watching everything fall apart. She cried harder, her body shaking as she tried to speak. I know I've messed up. I know I've hurt you. But Jim, please, don't throw away everything we've built. Please don't leave me. We've been through so much together. This doesn't have to be the end. I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. How can you say that? How can you act like this is something we can just move past? You didn't just cheat on me, Emma. You betrayed me. You made me look like a fool in front of everyone. And now, I can't even look at you without seeing him. She stood up from the table, walking toward me, her hands outstretched like she wanted to touch me. I stepped back, putting distance between us. I couldn't stand the thought of her touching me right now. Jim, please, she begged, her voice trembling. I love you. I don't want to lose you. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right. I'll go to therapy, I'll stop drinking, anything. Just give me a chance. Don't leave me. I stared at her, the woman I thought I knew, the woman I thought I'd spend my life with. And now? Now I didn't even recognize her. This wasn't the woman I married. This was someone else, someone who had shattered my heart and didn't know how to pick up the pieces. I don't know if I can, I said quietly, the weight of my words hanging between us. I don't know if I can ever forgive you for this. Her face crumpled again, and she collapsed onto the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. Please, please don't leave me, Jim. I love you. I love you so much. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. I just stood there, looking down at her, feeling the weight of our broken marriage pressing down on me like a stone. Everything we had built, everything we had dreamed of, was lying in ruins, and I didn't know how to rebuild it. Maybe I never could. Her sobs filled the room, echoing in the silence, but I couldn't find it in me to feel anything. No pity, no anger, just this numbness that had settled deep inside me. I watched her on the floor, begging, and all I could think was how everything had led to this moment. Years of our life together, reduced to this. I wanted to feel something. I wanted to feel enough anger to walk out and never look back, or enough love to forgive her. But I was stuck somewhere in between, caught in this place where neither felt right, and both felt impossible. Jim, she whispered between sobs, her voice raw. Please say something. Please tell me you're not leaving. Tell me we can fix this. I sighed, rubbing the back of my neck, trying to gather my thoughts. But there was nothing left to say. Every part of me felt drained, like she'd taken everything I had to give. I couldn't imagine trusting her again. I couldn't even imagine sleeping in the same bed, knowing what she'd done, knowing what she'd let happen. I can't just pretend this didn't happen, I finally said, my voice flat, distant. You broke something, Emma. Something I don't think we can fix. She crawled toward me, her hands reaching for mine, but I stepped back again, keeping that distance. Jim, please, I'll do anything, she pleaded. I'll fix myself. I'll make it right. You can't just leave. You can't just throw it all away. I shook my head, feeling the weight of her words, but they didn't hit the way they used to. Before, if she had said something like that, I would have believed her. I would have held on to that hope, held on to the idea that maybe we could work through anything. But this was different. I'm not throwing it away, I said, staring at the floor, unable to meet her eyes. You did that. You made that choice. She collapsed again, crying harder now, like my words had finally broken her. But it was too late. No amount of crying, no amount of promises could change the fact that she had betrayed me in a way I didn't think I could ever come back from. I love you, she sobbed again, her voice breaking, but the words didn't mean anything anymore. They were hollow, like everything else between us. For a moment, I just stood there, the silence between her sobs stretching out. I thought about all the things I'd imagined for our future, all the plans we'd made. Kids, vacations, growing old together. How did we end up here? How did we go from that to this? I don't know if love is enough, I muttered, more to myself than to her. I wasn't sure she even heard me over her crying. I looked around the room, the same living room where we'd had so many good memories, laughing, watching movies, talking late into the night. It was like everything had been tainted now, every corner of the house filled with the shadow of her betrayal. I needed to get out of there. I needed to clear my head to think, to figure out what the hell I was supposed to do next. But standing there in that house with her on the floor begging, it felt like the walls were closing in on me. "I need space," I finally said, the words heavy in my mouth. "I need time to figure this out." She lifted her head, her face streaked with tears, her eyes wide with fear. "Jim, please don't go. Please don't leave. We can talk about this. We can get help. Therapy. Anything. Just don't walk out." "I'm not walking out," I said, my voice steady, though it felt like a lie. "I just need space." She nodded, wiping her face, though I could see she didn't really believe me. She knew. Deep down, she knew that this wasn't something that could be fixed with space. But what else was there to say? I turned toward the door, feeling her eyes on me the whole time. My heart felt heavy as I reached for the handle, pausing for just a second, wondering if I should turn back, say something, do something. But there was nothing left to say. I opened the door and stepped out into the cold night, closing it quietly behind me. The night was cold and still as I stepped outside. The air hit me hard, but it was a relief compared to the suffocating weight inside the house. I stood on the porch for a moment, breathing deeply, trying to make sense of everything. My thoughts were still spinning, the image of Emma on the floor, crying and begging, playing over and over in my head. But I couldn't go back. Not yet. I got in the car, the silence following me as I drove off. The roads were mostly empty, and the only sound was the hum of the engine. I didn't have a destination in mind. I just needed to keep moving, to escape the mess of emotions that was threatening to overwhelm me. As I drove, my phone buzzed again, but I didn't look at it this time. I knew it was her, and I couldn't hear any more apologies, any more promises. Nothing she could say would change what had happened. Nothing could make me unsee what I'd seen, unfeel what I'd felt. I found myself pulling over at some old rest stop off the highway. It was quiet and empty, the kind of place no one goes to in the middle of the night. I sat there, staring out at the dark horizon, my mind drifting through everything that had happened. The anger, the pain, the humiliation. It was all still there, but now there was something else. A heaviness. A deep, aching sadness for everything we'd lost. We'd been married for 8 years. 8 years of memories, of building a life together. And now, because of one night, because of her choices, it felt like it had all been ripped away. I didn't know how to move forward from that. How do you rebuild after that kind of betrayal? How do you trust someone again after they've shown you just how little you mean to them? I thought about divorce. The word felt foreign, even though it was the first thing that came to mind when I left the house. I had never pictured my life going in that direction. I'd always thought we'd be one of those couples who made it through everything, through the fights, the struggles, the ups and downs. But now it felt like that was a distant dream. Could I really walk away from 8 years of marriage? Could I just leave her, leave everything we'd built? The thought of staying with her seemed impossible, but the thought of leaving, it terrified me. I didn't know who I was without her, even after what she'd done. But I knew one thing, nothing would ever be the same. Whether we stayed together or not, the marriage we had before was gone, destroyed by that one night. If we tried to rebuild, it would be something new, something fragile. And I wasn't sure if I had the strength to start over like that with her. The sky was starting to lighten with the first hints of dawn, and I realized I'd been sitting there for hours, lost in my own thoughts. I felt tired, not just physically, but emotionally, like I'd been carrying this weight for too long. I didn't know what was going to happen next. I didn't know if I was going to forgive her, if we were going to try to rebuild, or if I was going to walk away for good. All I knew was that whatever decision I made, it wasn't going to be easy. I turned the car back on and drove aimlessly for a while longer, feeling the weight of the road ahead, the uncertainty, the pain, the decisions I didn't want to make but knew I'd have to. Somewhere along the way, as the sun started to rise, I realized that no matter what happened with Emma, no matter what choice I made, I couldn't stay in this place forever, physically or emotionally. I was going to have to move forward. I just didn't know which direction that would be yet. For now though, I just kept driving, letting the road stretch out in front of me, not knowing where it was going to take me. But for the first time in hours, I felt like I could breathe again. The rest would come later.